Okay, let's get to it. We are here in the classroom. I'm Dr. Annette Feravich. I will probably get interrupted during our reading, but I thought I would just go ahead and see how far we get before I get interrupted, which will be sooner than later, I think, and in which case I'll just step aside and then see what else I need to do. If I have to get off, or I'm good. Oh, put a little dot there. All right. So he attacked the room of his love interest, La Jeblesse. It was pretty horrible. As for Punk Boy, apparently dude jumped right out the window and ran all the way to George Street, buck naked. That was Demarest for you, never a dull fucking moment. To make a long story short, he had to attend counseling to keep from losing his housing, couldn't go to the second floor for nothing, but now everybody in the dorm thought he was some kind of major psycho. The girls especially stayed away from him. As for La Jeblesse, she was graduating that year, so a month later they relocated her to the river dorms and called it even. I didn't really see her again, except once in a while I was on the bus and she was out on the street walking into Scott Hall with these dominatrix boots. And that's how our year ended. Him vacated of hope and tapping at the computer, me being asked in the hall how I like dorming with Mr. Crazy Man, and me asking back how their ass would like dorming with my foot. A lame couple of weeks. When it came time to re-up at the dorm, me and O didn't even talk about it. My boys were still stuck in the mom's cribs, so I had to take my chances with the lottery again, and this time I hit the fucking jackpot. Ended up with a single in Frailinghausen. When I told Oscar that I was leaving Demarest, he pulled himself out of his depression long enough to look astounded, like he was expecting something else. I figured, I stammered, but before I could say another word, he said, "It's okay." And then, as I was turning away, he grabbed my hand and shook it very formally. "Sir, it's been an honor." "Oscar," I said. People ask me, did you see the signs? Did you? Maybe I did and just didn't want to think about it. Maybe I didn't. What the fuck does it really matter? All I knew was that I'd never seen him more unhappy, but there was a part of me that didn't care, that wanted out of there the same way I had wanted out of my hometown. On our last night as roommates, Oscar housed 2 bottles of orange Cisco I had bought him. I remember. You remember Cisco? Liquid crack, they used to call it. So, you know, Mr. Lightweight was fucked up. "To my virginity," Oscar shouted. "Oscar, cool it, bro." "Lucy! You want to go upstairs?" "Don't start this." She's going to be my interruption now. Hold on. That wanted out of there the same way I had wanted out of my hometown. Oh. Sorry. On our last night as roommates, Oscar housed... Oh, I already read that. "Oscar, cool it, bro. People don't want to hear about all that." You're right. They just want to stare at me. Come on, tranquilizate. He slumped. I'm copacetic. You ain't pathetic. I said copacetic. Everybody, he shook his head, misapprehends me. Oh my gosh. Same old thing out there. Gets herself just all worked up. Go sit down in your basket over there. In your basket. No. In your basket, I said. Go. March. Or upstairs. One of the two. I said march. And you better come down here and get in your basket. Go. No. When you come down here, you better get in your basket. And I mean it, Lucy. I'm gonna bop you. Good grief. I did say I was gonna bop her. Enough! Hold on. Now the guy. Too much excitement. Jeez. Story reading should be relaxing, but I think we're okay. Okay, so I said copacetic. Everybody shook his head. Everybody he shook his head misapprehends me. All the posters and books were packed, and it could have been the first day again if it hadn't been for how unhappy he was. On the real first day, he'd been excited, kept calling me by my full name until I told him it's Junior, Oscar, just Junior. I guess I knew I should have stayed with him, should have sat my ass in that chair and told him that shit was going to be cool, but it was our last night, and I was fucking tired of him. I wanted to fuck silly, this Indian girl I had on Douglas, smoke a joint, and then go to bed. Fare thee well, he said as I left. Fare thee well. What he did was this, drank a third bottle of Cisco and then walked unsteadily down the New Brunswick train station with its crumbling facade and a long curve of tracks that shoots high over Raritan. Even in the middle of the night, doesn't take much to get into the station or to walk out onto the tracks, which is exactly what he did. Stumbled out toward the river, toward Route 18, New Brunswick falling away beneath him until he was 77 feet in the air, 77 feet precisely. From what he would later recall, he stood on that bridge for a good long time, watching the streaking lights of the traffic below, reviewing his miserable life, wishing he'd been born in a different body, regretting all the books he would never write, maybe trying to get himself to reconsider. And then the 412 express to Washington blew in the distance. By then he was barely able to stand, close his eyes, or maybe he didn't. And when he opened them, there was something straight out of Ursula Le Guin standing by his side. Later, when he would describe it, he would call it the golden mongoose, but even he knew that wasn't what it was. It was a very placid, very beautiful, gold-limbed eyes that reached through you, not so much in judgment or reproach, but for something far scarier. They stared at each other. It's serene as a Buddhist, he in total disbelief. And then the whistle blew again, and his eyes snapped open or closed, and it was gone. Dude had been waiting his whole life for something just like this to happen to him. Had always wanted to live in a world of magic and mystery, but instead of taking note of the vision and changing his ways, the fuck just shook his swollen head. The train was nearer now, and so before he could lose his courage, he threw himself down into the darkness. He had left me a note, of course, and behind it a letter, each for his sister, his mother, and Jenny. He thanked me for everything. He told me I could have his books, his games, his movies, his special droves. He told me he was happy to have been friends. He signed off, your compañero, Oscar Wilde. Compañero. If he'd landed en Route 18 as planned, it would have been lights out forever, but in his drunken confusion, he must have miscalculated, or maybe, as his mother claims, he was being watched from up on high, because the dude missed 18 proper and landed on the divider, which should have been fine. Those dividers are 18 are like concrete guillotines, would have done him lovely, burst him into intestinal confetti, except that this one was one of those garden dividers that had plant shrubs and he hit the freshly tilled loam and not the concrete. Instead of finding himself in nerd heaven, where every nerd gets 58 virgins to role play with, he woke up in Robert Wood Johnson with 2 broken legs and a separated shoulder, feeling like, well, he jumped off the New Brunswick train bridge. I was there, of course, with his mother and his thuggish uncle, who took regular bathroom breaks to snort up. He saw us, and what did the idiot do? He turned his head and cried. His mother tapped him on his good shoulder. You'll be doing a lot more crying when I get through with you. A day later, Lola arrived from Madrid. Didn't have a chance even to say a word before her mother launched into the standard Dominican welcome. So now you come, now that your brother's dying. If I'd known that's what it would take, I would have killed myself a long time ago. Ignored her, ignored me, sat next to her brother, took his hand. Mister, she said, are you okay? Shook his head. No. It's been a long, long time, but when I think of her, I still see her at the hospital on that first day, straight from Newark Airport, dark rings around her eyes, her hair as tangled and maenade, and yet she still had the time before appearing to put on some lipstick and makeup. I was hoping for some good energy, even at the hospital, trying to get ass, but she blew me up instead. Why didn't you take care of Oscar, she demanded. Why didn't you do it? 4 days later, they took him home, and I went back to my life too, headed home to my lonely mother and to tore up London Terrace. I guess if I'd been a real pal, I would have visited him up in Patterson like every week, but I didn't. What can I tell you? It was fucking summer, and I was chasing down a couple of new girls. And besides, I had a job. Wasn't enough time, but what there really wasn't enough of was ganas. I did manage to call him a couple of times to check up on him. Even that was a lot because I kept expecting his mother or sister to tell me that he was gone. But no, he claimed he was regenerated. No more suicide attempts for him. He was writing a lot, which was always a good sign. I'm going to the Dominican Tolkien, he said. Only once did I drop in, and that was because I was in P-Town visiting one of my Susias. Not part of the plan, but then I just spun the wheel, pulled up to a gas station, made the call, and the next thing I knew, I was at the house where he had grown up. His mother too sick to come out of her room, and him looking as thin as I'd ever seen him. Suicide suits me, he joked. His room nerdier than him, if that was possible. X-Wings and TIE fighters hanging from the ceiling. Mine and his sister's signatures, the only real ones on his last cast. The right leg broken worse than the left. The rest were thoughtful consolations from Robert Heinlein, Isaac Asimov, Frank Herbert, and Samuel Delaney. His sister not acknowledging my presence, so I laughed when she walked by the open door and asked loudly, "How's Lamuda doing?" "She hates being here," Oscar said. "What's wrong with Patterson?" I asked loudly. "Hey, Muda, what's wrong with Patterson?" "Everything," she yelled from down the hall. She was wearing these little running shorts. The sight of her leg muscles jiggling alone made the trip worth making. Me and Oscar sat in his room for a little bit, not saying much. I stared at all his books and his games, waited for him to say something. Must have known I wasn't going to let it slide. It was foolish, he finally said. Ill-advised. "You could say that twice. What the fuck were you thinking, oh?" He shrugged miserably. "I didn't know what else to do. Dude, you don't want to be dead. Take it from me. No pussy is bad, but dead is like no pussy times 10. It went like that for about half an hour. Only one thing sticks out. Right before I headed out, he said, "It was the curse that made me do it, you know." "I don't believe in that shit, Oscar. That's our parents' shit. It's ours too," he said. "Is he going to be okay?" I asked Lola on the way out. "I think so," she said, filling ice cube trays with faucet water. "He says he's going back to Demarest in the spring. Is that a good idea?" She thought about it a second. "That was Lola for you." "I do," she said. "You know best." I finished my keys out. "So how's that fiancé?" "He's fine," she said blandly. "Are you and Surian still together?" Killed to even hear her name. Not for a long time. And then we stood there and stared at each other. In a better world, I would have kissed her over the ice trays, and that would have been the end of all of our troubles. But you know exactly what kind of world we live in. It ain't no fucking Middle Earth. I just nodded my head, said, "See you around, Lola," and drove home. That should have been the end of it, right? Just a memory of some nerd I once knew who tried to kill himself. Nothing more, nothing more. But the De Leons, it turned out, weren't a clan you could just shake off. Now, 2 weeks into senior year, he showed up at my dorm room to bring over his writings and to ask me about mine. I couldn't believe it. Last I heard, he was planning on subbing at his old high school, taking classes at BCC, but there he was, standing at my door, sheepishly holding a blue folder. "Hail and well met, Junior," he said. "Oscar," I said in disbelief. He had lost even more weight and was trying his best to keep his hair trim and his face shaved. He looked, if you can believe it, good. Still talking space opera, though. Had just finished with his first of his projected quartet of novels. Totally obsessed with it now. "May be the death of me," he sighed, and then he caught himself. "Sorry, of course nobody at Demarest wanted to room with him. What a surprise. We all know how tolerant the tolerant are." So when he returned in the spring, he'd have a double to himself. Not that it did him any good, he joked. "Demarest won't be the same without your mesomorphic grimness," he said matter-of-factly. "Ha," I said. "You should definitely visit me in Patterson when you have a reprieve. I have a plethora of new Japanimation for your viewing pleasure." "Definitely, bro," I said, "definitely." I never did go. I got busy, God's truth, delivering pool tables, bringing the grades up, getting ready to graduate, and besides, that fall a miracle happened. Surian showed up at my door, looking more beautiful than I ever saw her. "I want us to try again." Of course, I said yes, and went out and put a cuerno in her that very nice. Dios mío, some niggers couldn't have gotten ass on Judgment Day. Me, I couldn't not get ass even when I tried. My negligence didn't stop. Oh, from visiting me every now and then with some new chapter and some new story of a girl he'd spotted on the bus, on the street, or in class. Same old Oscar, I said. Yes, he said weakly. Same old me. Rutgers was always a crazy place, but that last fall it seemed to be especially bugging. In October, a bunch of freshman girl I knew on Livingston got busted for dealing coke, 4 of the quietest gorditas around. Like they say, los que menos corren vuelan. On Bush, the lambdas started a fight with the alphas over some idiocy for weeks. There was talk of a black Latino war, but nothing ever happened. Everybody too busy throwing parties and fucking each other to scrap. That winter, I even managed to sit in my dorm room long enough to write a story that wasn't too bad about the woman who used to live in the patio behind my house in the Dominican Republic. A woman everybody said was a prostitute, but who used to watch me and my brother while my mom and my abuela were at work. My professor couldn't believe it. I'm impressed. Not a single shooting or stabbing in the whole story. Not that it helped any. I didn't win any of the creative writing prizes that year. I kind of had been hoping. And then it was finals. And who of all people do I end up running into? Lola. I almost didn't recognize her because her hair was ill long and because it was wearing those cheap blocky and she was wearing those cheap blocky glasses, the kind an alternative white girl would wear. Enough silver on her wrist to ransom the royal family and so much leg coming out of her denim skirt. It just didn't seem fair. As soon as she saw me, she tugged down the skirt. Not like it did much good. This was on the E-bus. I was on my way back from seeing a girl of 0 note, and she was heading out to some stupid-ass farewell party for one of her friends. I slopped down next to her, and she said, "What's up?" Her eyes so incredibly big and empty of any guile, or expectation for that matter. "How have you been?" I asked. "Good, how about you?" "Just getting ready for break." "Merry Christmas." And then just like De Leon, she went back to reading her book. I poked at the book, Introduction to Japanese. "What the hell are you studying now? Didn't they throw you out of here already?" "I'm teaching English in Japan next year," she said matter-of-factly. "It's going to be amazing." Not, "I'm thinking about," or "I've applied," but "I am." "Japan?" I laughed a little mean. "What the hell is a Dominican going out to Japan for?" "You're right," she said, turning the page irritably. "Why would anyone want to go anywhere when they have New Jersey?" We let that sit for a sec. "That was a little harsh," I said. "My apologies." Like I said, it was December. My Indian girl, Lily, was waiting for me back on College Avenue, and so was Surian. But I wasn't thinking about either of them. I was thinking about the one time I'd seen Lola that year. She'd been reading a book in front of the Henderson Chapel with such concentration I thought she might hurt herself. I'd heard from Oscar that she was living in Edison with some of her girlfriends, working at some office or another, saving money for her next big adventure. That day I'd seen her. I'd wanted to say hi, but I didn't have the balls. Figured she would egg me. I watched Commercial Avenue slide past, and there in the distance were the lights of Route 18. That was one of those moments that would always be Rutgers for me. The girls in front giggling about some guy, her hands on those pages, nails all painted up in cranberry, my own hands like monster crabs. In a couple of months, I'd be back in London Terrace if I wasn't careful, and she'd be off to Tokyo or Kyoto or wherever she was going. Of all the chicks I'd run up on at Rutgers, of all the chicks I'll run up on ever, Lola was the one I'd never gotten a handle on. So why did it feel like she was the one who knew me best? I thought about Surian and how she would never talk to me again. I thought about my own fears of actually being good because Lola wasn't Surian. With her, I'd have to be someone I'd never tried to be. We were reaching College Avenue, last chance, so I made like Oscar and said, "Have dinner with me, Lola. I promise I won't try to take your panties off." "Yeah, right," she said, almost ripping her page in the turning. I covered her hand in mine, and she gave me this frustrated, heart-wrenching look like she was already on her way down with me and didn't for the life of her understand why. It's okay, I said. No, it's fucking not okay. You're too short. But she didn't take her hand away. Okay, I'm going to stop there. I think that's a great place to stop. This is Dr. Annette Feravich. Thanks for joining me here in the classroom. This is the reading room, and I love this book. We'll have a shorter book the next time, right? But we are about 2/3 of the way through this book, and I just love it. I just love it. It's just a story, and I love it. Thanks for joining me here in the classroom. I will see you tomorrow, early bird, 8:30. Thanks for joining me.